All right. Hey, everyone. Okay. Wow. Sunday evening. I always start feeling a little bit anxious for the week on Sunday. That's probably why I picked today. That's why I picked Sunday to do these live streams for the next several weeks, and we'll see how that goes. But welcome everybody. I know some of you. My name is Carlos. Motivated Mindz is my channel, and I am going to bring you something tonight that I think is going to be helpful for this upcoming week. Again, that's kind of why I decided to do this on Sunday nights. I, for many years, have felt a lot of anxiety for the week ahead. And believe it or not, Sundays for many years kind of weighed a lot for me. And, weird, but that's just kind of how that worked out for me for, like I said, many years. When I began to work through that Sunday, this is the stuff I actually worked through, the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight, just learning how to navigate through that. Why was I feeling so much anxiety for the upcoming week? What was going on with that? Why would I procrastinate usually on Sundays? I would usually do a lot of pushing away and avoiding on Sundays. What I was doing was I was trying to push the week away as far as possible because of some of the responsibilities and things that were going to come up during the week. I know that were going to be tough for me. So that's what we're going to talk about, is stuff that is kind of hinders us from growing in that motivated mind. And there's nothing like negative emotions, right, that get in the way of our motivated minds, of us growing in our motivated minds. And we're going to learn some really interesting things. I'm going to throw a little bit, like I said, this is Psychoeducational Sundays, right? I'm going to throw a little bit of science at you, a little bit of that, okay? A little bit of clinical stuff tonight at you, because I know you can handle it. And then this will be on replay, so if anybody wants to watch this, everybody sees this afterward, hopefully they'll gain a lot from what I'm going to share. I shared with everybody the last week why I'm doing Sundays, and I want to share that a few more times before I drop it. But a lot of my clients ask me if I could do if I can be a little bit more accessible and available between sessions. And I thought, well, what better way to do it than on YouTube, where you can access it, it's always available, you can always go back. And I'm going to be talking about some real practical psychoeducational kinds of things that can really help us. A lot of cognitive behavioral therapeutic kind of things that we can do through YouTube virtually. And tonight is one of those things. So I'm going to light a fire around our negative emotions, why we have them, we're not going to get so much into where they're coming from as much as what we can do about them. Okay. And I'm going to share a little bit of my own story too. A little bit of my own story of how I was able to, I'm going to be careful here because listen, seriously, I haven't learned it. And that kind of is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, is when we say things like, I learned something. Well, I haven't learned it if I every once in a while still fall into it. Okay. So I haven't learned it as far as learning how to be above these negative emotions all the time. I haven't. I'm still learning how to do that. Okay? And so today we're going to talk about a little bit about what that's all about, what those negative emotions are all about, and what we can do to navigate through them more effectively. Okay? So let's do this. I'm going to light this fire, and you're going to help me fan these flames. Okay? So negative emotions. I'm going to go through a series of slides. I'm going to try to get through this so that we don't go too long. I'm still learning how to do this and keep the time appropriate, okay? Because I don't want to go too long, like I don't want to go too long in my sessions with people, because what happens? We start losing our attention. All right, so the first slide that we're going to get into is we're going to diagnose this a little bit. Here we go. So the positive about the negative. So why am I talking about this? Why do I even bring this up? It's shouldn't we just always be positive? right? Well, check this out. The negative thinking, it's an essential tool. Read it right there. It's an essential tool for reflection and the motivation to make changes. That's why we need it. Also, because negative emotions are a sign that something needs to change. And they motivate us towards making necessary changes. There's a lot of reasons why we need these things. The problem is when we go down that rabbit hole, let's say we fall into the rabbit hole of negative emotions and we don't know how to get out, right? We keep falling down the rabbit hole. And then let me tell you, some of you are probably listening, you know this. That rabbit hole can go forever, right? If we don't get out of that rabbit hole somehow, some way, we can go really deep and who knows, right? How long? In fact, you know what clinical depression is? Clinical depression is staying in that rabbit hole, right? And sometimes I work with people who find themselves going deeper and deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole. They don't know how to get out, and it's really hard for them. And let me go here. Let me write some of these things down because I want you to see, for instance, okay, so let's just talk really quick and excuse my writing, but because I'm not the greatest at this, hopefully you can read all this. Negative emotions. What are we talking about? When we say, in a minute, I'm going to say the word negativity bias. So what is negativity bias? Let me tell you, negativity bias is something, you're all going to relate to it. Do you ever experience fear? Do you have any insecurity at all in any area of your life? Do you ever get angry? Ever? How about frustration? Do you ever get frustrated? I mean, I was just frustrated about 15 minutes ago. Do you ever feel guilt? Have you ever felt that, or do you ever feel that? How about this? Do you ever feel alone? We don't like to really admit these things. And you know what? If you forgive me, but you can probably hear my dog a little bit. Every once in a while, you're going to probably hear my dog. My dog's in my room with me. Anger, alone. How about this? Everybody ever feel helpless? Ever feel confused? I'm just writing down some, things that most of us have probably felt. And here's a big one. And I can again relate to it. Inadequate. I'm not feeling these things all the time, but I do feel these things sometimes. And then what do I do with it? What do I do with these things? These are negative emotions. I remember a while back, this is several years ago, when I was at a group, and there was a person in that group who mentioned to me, we were talking about this stuff, about these negative emotions. And this person said, well, I just tell those negative emotions to go away. Whenever they come over me, I just reject them. I tell them to go away. I don't let them, entertain them at all. And what I knew about her was that she struggled with a lot of those negative emotions a lot. So I asked her, so what do you do when they come up? And she said, I just tell them to go away. I said, okay. So what do you do again? Again, when they come up, what do you do? And she continued to say the same thing. We went back and forth. She was dismissing those negative emotions. That's what she was trying to do. She was dismissing them. And the reason why she wasn't growing out of them, she wasn't experiencing growth, was because she wasn't accepting them. Now, let me be really clear about what I mean about acceptance. I don't mean we should settle for these negative emotions. I'm saying that we should accept them. There's a big difference between settling and accepting. If any of you out there know a recovering addict, you know that they didn't settle. If they're in 12-step, they didn't settle for their addiction. They accepted that they were powerless over it. And then they were able to do something about it, right? And that's the key tonight, is when there's acceptance, now we can find a strategy. But we have to come out of that denial first, right? So let's look at this. Okay, so what is negativity bias? Let's talk about negativity bias for a second. And then I'm going to get to some people who are commenting, where I'm seeing some comments here that I want to get to, and people who are in the chat. negativity bias, if you have ever heard of this before, okay, this is more of a clinical term, negativity bias. Our brains are more responsive to negative than positive stimuli. That's just the way that we see the brain work. The brain it's extremely complex, of course. It's hardwired, though, with negativity because it's essential for survival. This is how we see the brain, over the, hundreds and thousands of years. We really have been in mostly in times where we've had to survive. The brain has had to survive. We're not like that now. At least those of us who are living here, we don't experience that. And yet that negativity bias still has a way of playing a role. It's not gone. It's why we listen to a lot of negative press and things like that. That kind of sticks in our head a little bit more than anything. Okay, so here we go. Let me get to this before we keep going here. Let me get to some of these. I've seen a couple people I haven't seen in a while. Right on. Obs, you're here. It's so cool. This is somebody I just love her. She's amazing. I see her comments a lot. I've watched her videos, and I think she's going to be able to relate a lot tonight and give a lot of good feedback. I have a strong feeling about that. Peter, hey, you're here. Gosh, man. If any of you haven't seen my video when I interviewed Peter Gray, go back and see that. That dude is amazing. He's done some stuff lately on his kitchen channel, so you got to go see that stuff too. So Peter also, he says, I think a person like myself needs to make the determination that the negative emotion is also a destructive emotion, one I would use against myself. Absolutely. And that's a really good point. Check this out. No one can stop the entrance of that thought. It's going to come. In fact, Peter, the very first thing you said, the next thing you said here is rejected. I can't stop myself from experiencing a negative emotion. I can't stop it. It's going to enter at some point. The key is, what am I going to do with it? And that takes exactly what you just said, Peter. It takes examination. I have to examine what that thought is about. Is that accurate? And listen, if you write anything down in your journal right now, I'd write this down, okay? Is that thought that you're experiencing, is that your opinion or is that a fact? Is it an opinion or is it a fact? I feel alone. Is that your opinion that you're alone or is it a fact? Okay? Stress out, stress free again. You're here. Good to see you. I'm glad you're in the house. Love it. So a YouTuber will get 10 positive comments. Oh, this is so good. And one negative comment. The one comment torpedoes them all while they ignore all the positive comments. I don't even need to keep doing this. I think I'm going to finish up now because you just nailed it all, Peter. Yes, that's what we do. That's what we call negativity bias. That's what happens, unfortunately, but that's the way. When we see how our brain is hardwired, we tend to go there, which is why we need to be more intentional today, living in the time and place that we live in. We have to be more intentional today around increasing that positivity. And we're going to talk about what healthy and unhealthy positivity. Can you believe that? There's actually an unhealthy positivity when you think about it? Yes, we're going to talk about that in a second. So let's look at this next slide, okay? I talked about our brains are hardwired for negative then positive stimuli, okay? So let's go here now. This is a quote I want you to hear, okay? It's also because negative information causes a surge in activity in a critical information processing area of our brain. Our limbic system is the area of the brain that I'm talking about. Our behaviors and attitudes, they tend to be shaped more powerfully by bad news. Can anyone relate to this? Right? Our attitudes tend to be shaped more powerfully by bad news and by bad experiences and by bad information. That's why, when I get done with my day, I'm more apt to talk about the negative experiences that I had today instead of the positive ones. And again, we need to be more intentional about filling out that other column, that positive column. And we're going to talk about that in just a sec. Okay. Okay. How are we affected by this negativity bias? How are we affected by it? Well, negative bias can have a wide variety of effects on how people think, respond, and feel. Every one of us, I'm sure, if we're being honest with ourselves, we can relate to this, right? Everyday areas, we're affected by it. Relationships, decision-making, the way we perceive people, all of that is affected by that negativity bias. What do we do sometimes? When we kind of see somebody, you know what I usually do? And this, I hate to admit this, but it's true. I size somebody up. I'm not looking at somebody and picking out their positive. I'm usually going toward a little bit of, what's this guy all about? And there's something about that sometimes. And that's my negativity bias. I've got to let that go, in order to kind of see what's going on behind the scenes. Relationships, decision-making, we oftentimes are coming from that negativity bias. And then the benefits. Why? Literally, there are benefits of admitting that we're unhappy or dissatisfied. I'm not talking about complaining. Have any of you ever heard or been around somebody? Hang on a minute. My dog's making a bunch of noise. Lewis, if you're listening right now, I've got the dog. You have a much more important person that you've got to take care of every night, but I've got my dog. So there are benefits of admitting that we're unhappy or dissatisfied. And again, it's not about complaining, right? None of us want to be around a complainer. I don't like to be around somebody who's complaining all the time. It's you can't hang with that very long, right? But that's not what this is. This is about admitting, again, admitting it, being honest about it. Once we allow ourselves to accept the non-ideal reality, it's not ideal. Can we admit that? This is not the way I wanted it to work out. This is not the way I hoped for it to work out, but this is the way it's worked out. But if we can do that, check it out. We're able to see a solution then. The resulting negative emotions are motivators to drive us to change. Are you connecting with this? Do you see how the brain doesn't want to let negative emotions go to waste? Is that crazy? Really, honestly. It's amazing how our brains are designed to be able to use everything that comes in. Pretty powerful, by the way. So, and by the way, I think my wife took my dog. She was getting a little loud. My dog's name, Peter's asking me what my dog's name is. My dog's name is Maru, Maru. And it comes from a Japanese name called Tobi Maru. And that's where my wife lived for several years before she moved here. And that was what we thought we would call my dog, And I think it means grace in Japanese. That's what it means. And that's what we thought. Although, I'd have to argue a little bit around, don't know if that's the right name. Now that she's 10 years old or 11 years old, I'm not sure that's the name we should have named her. She's a little snippy. She likes to bite. So she's not the most, I would say, the most socialized dog. That's my fault. So, okay, so back to our admitting we were unhappy or dissatisfied. This is really hard to do, especially if we're stuck in positivity. Do you hear what I'm saying? If we're stuck in positivity, we don't want to admit that we're dissatisfied about something or we're unhappy about anything. But that's not being fully authentic, and we're going to see that in just a second. One of the biggest motivators for change is being uncomfortable with our real feelings. Okay? Listen to that. One of the biggest motivators for change is being uncomfortable with our real feelings. I am talking about living in your authentic self. Our whole self is much more than our positive self. Do you realize that? Interesting thing. Many years ago, had some real strong problems issues around relationship. So some of you might be able to relate to this a little bit. But my relationships were kind of destructive. Okay, not kind of. I'm minimizing it. I'm minimizing it right now. That's called denial. They were brutal. They were destructive. They were hurtful. They were extremely difficult, and that was mostly because of the issues that I brought into the relationship. What were those issues? Abandonment issues. Lots and lots of really difficult, screwed up kind of beliefs that I had around relationship, and all that stuff came from my childhood. So every relationship I had was extremely difficult. What was difficult about them? What was difficult were the emotions that were being triggered by a lot of these beliefs that I had around relationship. For instance, when I felt like my partner when they were misunderstanding me, so I felt misunderstood, I would personalize that. I would make that part of my story. And when I made that part of my story, when that was a belief that I connected with, that belief would take me on a wild ride. Okay, it wasn't just a fleeting thought. It wasn't just just one of those quick thoughts that would kind of scroll around at the bottom of the screen, scroll by at the bottom of the screen. No. This was a belief that I acted upon. Okay, and those negative emotions that would come over me, I didn't know how to cope with them. My problem, I didn't know how to cope with these really powerful emotions where I felt fear, insecurity, where I felt frustrated, some of these things here, when I felt inadequate in that relationship, where I felt insecurity there, where I felt alone. This was a really big one right here. Alone was a huge one that I felt in those relationships. And so, there is, when you're talking about difficult emotions, everyone, the idea is if we want to grow into a whole person, we don't reject them. We don't toss them away. That's not the way we do it. Anybody see Inside Out? Has anybody seen that animated film called Inside Out? One of the best films ever on this topic, because sadness and joy did not want to commingle. In fact, joy didn't want sadness to come into the picture. Do you remember that? If you saw the film, sadness did not want joy to come into the picture. Joy didn't want sadness to come into the picture. Joy wanted to keep sadness out, right? And that little girl, unfortunately, she was struggling because she wasn't able to grieve. And that was the sadness. And eventually she was able to do that in that film, and that was really powerful. So again, when you look at these, these things, let me go back here again, that we tend to be shaped more powerfully by bad news, experiences, and information. Let me go to this one. I think when you look at a negative bias, I shared this with you a second ago. Think about when you were impacted by decisions, when you've been impacted in relationship, and where maybe even the way you perceive people. How is that impacted? Here's another really, really quick one. A person decides to go to a support group. Okay. That support group, maybe it's around anxiety. They want to go to a support group that can help them work through their anxiety with other people who maybe understand them and understand anxiety. So they go. And they come back and they realize, it was a good meeting, but I just really felt judged by one of the people there. Okay. So do you see what I'm saying? There's a negativity bias most likely getting in the way of this person's recovery. Because it's very unlikely that they were being rejected by somebody in that group. It's very unlikely because people in that group are pretty safe. But she decides to go to another group of supportive people. She comes back, the same thing happens. I felt a little rejected by one of the people there in the group. And that's where you start to see, okay, your negativity bias now is in play. And it's getting in the way of your growth. It's getting in the way of your change. So the benefits, we got to keep coming back to the benefits. You know, if we could admit this, we are going to experience more motivation. And then let's go here. One of the biggest motivators, like I said, is uncomfortable emotions. And so when I said to that client, hey, how can you embrace those negative emotions that you're feeling in that group? What can you do about that? Like, how can you use that for you? What can you do? And this was the next step right here. To live out our most authentic selves means we need to accept both parts, negative and positive. And so I had her do this negative bias kind of worksheet that really talked about and broke down whether this is my bias at work, or is this the person, maybe that I'm talking to? Is it me, or is it legit this person who's rejecting me? Okay. And as she began to process this, she began to realize, you know what? I need to embrace this negative feeling that I have of rejection and learn from it. And that's where I'm like, yes, now you're getting it. Don't reject it. We've got to do something about it. And that leads us to our next slide. You can harness the power of negative thinking in your life. We can all do this. We can harness the power of negative thinking in our life. You know what's really interesting about this too? There are a lot of faiths actually that talk about negative thinking. And the reason why is because it's so powerful. Negative thinking can take us down a road because there's a bunch of beliefs in there that you think about yourself and others, but we can harness the power. We can harness the power of negative thinking, and we can use it for our good. So how much positivity do we need? Listen closely. This is where we're going to get into some, if you have a journal next to you, this is what you want to write down. Check this out. When our moods are positive 3 times more than they are negative, that's when we start to spiral upward. Okay? If our positive to negative ratio is 3-to-1, we reach a tipping point where we experience an upward spiral. Okay, we can actually get into an upward spiral of positivity, and everything then appears to fall into place for our moods and performance. I'm going to leave that up there for a second because I want you to see that. How is that possible? Well, how is an upward spiral of positivity possible? You've seen this. You may have experienced this, but let me just talk about some people that I know, an example of somebody who took a negative experience and negative emotions with that experience. What they did was they got into a consistent ritual of writing out gratitudes every day. And not only gratitudes, but they were learning how to reinforce the positive things in their life by writing them out. Gratitude lists. They would write gratitude letters. They made it a point. They were very intentional about blocking out, about having boundaries, I should say, around negative people, negative messages. They had a boundary around that stuff. They can't obviously avoid it altogether, right? They can't. But they can have boundaries around it. So when something negative starts to come in, they capture the thought and they would do something about it. The entrance would come, they would examine the thought, and then they would execute the thought, and they would move on to something else. They would replace it with something more rewarding. Did you hear what I just said? They would replace it with something more rewarding. And that's really one of the keys to replacing our negative thoughts, not to run away from them, avoid them, because we're not going to outrun we're not going to outrun our negative emotions and false beliefs and those things. We're not going to outrun it. That'll create a bunch of anxiety. They'll be there. They'll be there waiting for us. The key is to replace them with something more rewarding, right? That's the real key right there. And then how to harness the power of negative emotions. How do we do this? Here are 3 things. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the best possible self exercise. I haven't put it in there yet, but I'm going to put it, in the description below. I'm going to add that after I'm done here because I think I forgot to add that in. Best possible self exercise. What is that? That is about visualizing or even journaling, what your best possible self looks like. What does that best possible self look like to you? In, tomorrow, what does that best possible self look like to you, in the ways that you're thinking and the ways that you're doing and the things that you are committing to? I mean, what does the best possible self look like for you? In other words, what does your ideal self look like? It might be really hard to identify that because we don't usually like to talk about that. We usually talk about ways that we screw up or ways that we fail or ways that we fall short. But what about our ideal self? Maybe we're too afraid to talk about our ideal self because maybe we're too afraid to fail. I don't want to talk about my ideal self because, I know that I fail over and over and over again, and I just don't even want to acknowledge that. I don't even want to see that. Well, it's important that we are vulnerable enough to do this, okay? To actually look at our best possible self, to write that out, to journal it out, or to even, again, visualize that in your mind. I've done these exercises. I do these exercises, and they are extremely valuable. Gratitude journal or gratitude letter or visiting somebody. There's a powerful way that we can reflect immediately. The reason I put these 3 on here is because this is the absolute lowest hanging fruit of changing our perspective. It's these 3 things. There are a whole bunch of ways that we can make an adjustment. These 3 are ones that we can do right now, immediately. We can do a gratitude journal. What are you thankful for? What are you thankful for today? Oh, there's so much to be thankful for. Even in my worst and most darkest times, when everything just looked so helpless and hopeless. Remember when I was talking a minute ago about those broken relationships, one after another? I got to a place where I felt so helpless and hopeless, where there was nowhere else to turn, where I was so immersed in those negative beliefs that I am unloved, unaccepted, unworthy, etc. Those were the things I was really connected to, right? I was living out those false beliefs, and I was isolated, and I was alone. And I really did believe that there was, that I was unloved and unaccepted. What changed that for me was I began to connect with what I call fact checkers. Fact checkers are other people, accountable, close, safe people. They're fact checkers. Because I can go to that person, let's say one of my mentors, I can go to him and I can say, look, I'm feeling alone, I'm feeling, unacceptable, I'm feeling these things. And as I'm sharing with him, he's asking me questions. He's a fact checker. He's helping me check these facts. Are these, Carlos, are these your opinions? Is this your opinion, or are these facts? And you know what it always came out to? Honestly, it always came out to these were my opinions based on my emotions. These weren't facts. People loved me. A lot of people loved me. A lot of people cared for me. I wasn't alone. And I needed to begin to harness those things through gratitude. And you know what gratitude was coming through? Other people. It was coming through other people. I was able to connect with gratitude through these people that I was surrounding myself with. These were safe people who could hold a safe space for me and my feelings. And another thing I want to say is savoring positive moments. Here is something that I have. Sometimes I have couples do this. So let's say there is a couple that goes through a lot of radical pain. There's stuff that happens in that relationship that blows it up. Okay. A lot of hurt, resentment, all of that stuff. And then they jump into a process of recovery. They jump into a process of change. They start to reconcile and they both start taking ownership. And then they say to me, we're going on a vacation. For the first time since our relationship blew up, we're going on a vacation. So I'm like, I'm so glad that you told me you're going on vacation, because now we're going to savor the moment. Okay. Let's game plan. I mean, I want you to consider taking photos. I want you to consider taking video. I want you to consider taking as many pictures and as much video as possible on this trip. Okay. And I want a game plan for you to actually savor those moments. You know why? Because of the negativity bias, you're more likely going to focus on the first trip up. The first thing that's going to come up that's going to be negative, you're going to hone in on that. So let's start to work on savoring these positive moments. Savor them. That might make sense to you. Maybe that makes a little bit of sense to you. Don't know. But the best possible self, is using your imagination and seeing yourself live in your ideal self, which can be really, really powerful. A gratitude journal every day. Listen, I have some of the most, over the years, I have worked for the most depressed people. And you know what? These three things have been at the core of their recovery. Do you realize that? It's, sometimes medication is needed. Yes. But you know what medication does? It gets you to be able to do this. Okay. Medication isn't the whole answer, but sometimes it gets you to the place where you can actually start writing a gratitude journal every day, where you can start experiencing this best possible self. I've told everybody this before. The biggest miracle, one of the biggest miracles outside of, childbirth and growing intimate, joyful relationship, is a recovering addict. Somebody who's recovered from something so insane and literally changing the chemistry of their brain. That is an incredible journey of change. And they do these things. They do the best possible self. They do gratitude journals, most of them every single day. And they savor those positive moments all the time. They're always doing this stuff. They're always doing it. So when we're feeling this stuff right here, fear, insecurity, anger, frustration, guilt, alone, helpless, confused, inadequate, sad. Here's the thing. I want you to try to understand this. You might be killing it in an area of your life. You might be just killing it in certain areas of your life. Success. I've known some extremely successful people. I've had some clients that have just owned giant companies and been extremely successful. But why are they coming to my office? Why are they seeing me? It's because they're struggling so deeply in certain areas of their life. They're crashing and burning. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live my life experiencing radical success in one area and crashing and burning in another area. I don't want to live that way. That's not wholeness. That's not the footprint I want to leave behind. I want to experience more wholeness in my life. I don't want to, and again, there are areas of my life that I am more successful at than others. But if I'm going to grow in those areas of my life that are bothersome or that I struggle in, I'm going to have to admit that I am basically failing in that area. And I saw somebody here say this. Obs, you said, yikes, yeah, admitting failure is hard. Oh, come on, right? Can everybody say amen to that? Admitting failure is hard. It's so hard. Let me share something about that. I don't know if anybody here has watched a film, a series. If you want to go back, it's on Hulu. It's called The Selection. And this is an amazing film of a bunch of Navy SEALs that took a whole bunch of people who wanted to try to go through their SEAL program, like 50 people. And so these Navy SEALs take these people through their program. And, you know, the very first exercise the SEAL team takes them through, about half of them drop. The very first day, half of them drop. The rest of the time, you know, is about slowly weaning down to one or two people at the very end. But here's what I really got from The Selection. When you would fail, when you couldn't go any further, you would have to pull off a Velcro initial on your arm so everybody could hear it, obviously. And you'd have to hand it over to the SEAL, admitting you failed. That enough right there is like, I would never want to be on that show because of that, probably most of all. I could take the other stuff, the insane stuff that they do, but that one scared the crap out of me. Okay. So when you would have to do that, this is what it would look like. Somebody would fail. They couldn't continue. They tapped out. They couldn't go anymore. They'd walk up to a SEAL, and the SEAL would say to them, "Are you sure? Are you sure? You sure you want to? Are you sure you want to take that Velcro? You know, because if you want to give that to me, you know what that says, right? That says you failed. That's what that says. So I just want to remind you, that's what you're about to do." I mean, they were extremely bold and in the face of these competitors. And if the competitor was just too far gone and they were done, fully done, yes, you would hear the Velcro tear off the shoulder and they would give them that patch. And you know what was so powerful about that is that Navy SEAL every time would take that patch and they would look at them in the eye and they would say, "I want you to know, this doesn't mean that you're a failure. This means that you failed. But it doesn't mean you're a failure. You can try again. You can try this again. You can do it again. This isn't it. It's not over." And it was one of the most powerful things I received from watching that show, The Selection, is, do you understand why a Navy SEAL then, can you kind of get an idea of why maybe a Navy SEAL would be so powerful at what they do? You see, they can't struggle with negativity on the battlefield. They can't, because they're operating at such efficiency, and then the person next to them is depending on their decision making, right? So they have to be on all the time. They can't allow negative emotions to get in the way. They can't allow the negativity bias in the way. They can't allow it. It's pretty powerful, isn't it? When I first saw it, I thought about that and just, wow, how powerful it is to be able to accept that I failed, but to not accept that I am a failure. Okay? And if there's anything I want you to receive from today, I want you to receive that. Okay? You may have failed at something. We could admit that. Can we admit that together, that we have failed at things? But can we also admit that we are not failures? We can always try again. It's really powerful, you know, this negativity bias. It's important to understand that there's more going on. It's not just you being negative. It's not just, for some people, you know, when we experience depression, things like that, there might be more going on behind the scenes. But it's also important for you to understand, what I'm telling you today is, it's important for you to understand that there is something going on that's been there since you were about 6 months old. And it's called a negativity bias. And it's why we focus so much more on the negative than we do a positive. Here's something really powerful. Listen to this. There was a study done not too long ago with a group of a control group, okay? And this control group was a control group of people that they made to feel anxiety. Okay, some anxiousness in there. And you know what they did when they made them feel anxious? They put a dull blade to their knuckles to see how long they would be able to handle that pain, how much pain they would actually feel. Okay. And then they took the same dull blade to another control group of people that they made to feel joy, that they made to feel positive emotions. Can you guess which group tapped out the soonest? That group who was experiencing anxiousness, they tapped out way sooner with that pain. The pain was greater for them than it was with the control group of people with positive emotions. And this is what I'm going to talk about next week. I'm going to talk about how negative emotions can actually create a positive perspective, a healthy perspective, an accurate perspective, actually. And it's just what I said. Isn't it interesting that somebody who's in a positive place can handle pain differently than a person in a negative place? Pretty fascinating, isn't it? Okay, so I hope you're connecting with what I'm sharing. I've got just a couple more minutes here. I want you to process this. Some of this stuff I want you to, like when I talk about how to harness these things, I would encourage you, do that this week. Within the next hour, if you want to come back, I'm going to put that best possible self in the description. I'm going to put that PDF in there so you can actually download that and work through that. It's a really cool exercise. But I also want to encourage you, write out a gratitude list. Even when we're done here, write out the things that you are thankful for. Here's what I usually do with somebody with gratitude list. In a session, in my office, I'll ask them to start filling out that gratitude list. Tell me something right now that you're thankful for. And you know what they'll tell me? And tell me if you can relate to this. Well, I'm really thankful that I was able to follow through and complete that task the other day. It made me feel really good. But I don't know if I can do it again. Do you see how quickly the person came back to the other column? Do you relate to that? We come back to that other column so fast. It's almost like, again, that's negativity bias. We're so drawn to go back to that place of negativity. We can't stay in that positive column very long. Let's learn together how to stay in that positive column. Remember what I said earlier. Let me see if I can find this. We were talking about how much do I need. Remember this, okay? When our moods are positive 3 times more than they are negative. 3 times more than they're negative. That means we have to be pretty intentional because there's a lot of negativity always coming up around us, isn't there? Things are pretty crazy these days. But that positive to negative ratio has to be 3-to-1 so that we can reach that tipping point where we're experiencing an upward spiral of positivity. Okay, you know what? Let me tell you one more thing that means. When we're experiencing an upward spiral of positivity, check this out. Something really bad happens. Something negative. We get we get hit by some negative emotion. Maybe we feel rejected by somebody. Well, guess what? If we're in that 3-to-1, if we're doing the 3-to-1 and we're in that upward spiral, guess how much that negative emotion of rejection is going to impact us? It's not going to impact us at a 9 or 10. It might just impact us at a 3 or 4. Do you see what I mean? Because we have, in other words, some gas in the tank, right? We've been doing the 3-to-1. We've been filling up on positive truths in our lives. We've been in those gratitude lists, in that best possible self-exercise, those kinds of things. We've been capturing positive moments, meaning, and then we hit a negative emotion. We're able to move through those in a much, much, much more effective way. So, a couple of people here mentioning a couple things, I think I mentioned this. Obs, you said, yeah, it's amazing. You failed. You're not a failure. Yes, we can fail. I mean, I failed at something this week. But guess what? It doesn't hold power over me. It's not destroying me. Why? Because I'm not a failure. I failed. And so I'm learning from that by sitting in those emotions, by learning from, the pain that I experienced, I felt inadequate in that moment. I felt kind of helpless in that moment. I allowed myself to move through that, and now I am better for it. Now I am better for it. Mark, great to have you here, Mark. He says, I have failed in many things. I thought I was a failure. I'm not. I just fail at things. Absolutely, Mark. You're nailing it. Yes, this is what we need to realize is we can fail at things, and that's okay. Can you be okay failing at something? That negativity bias may not want you to be okay failing at something, but we can be intentional and be okay failing at something, knowing that we're not a failure. Chris in progress. Chris is here, my man. Sometimes reframing my situation helps me move from negative emotions to positive. I didn't put in reframing, but that's one of them. And the reason why Chris can do that is because Chris has done some work. Okay, so reframing is one of those things too that I will touch on in another video. How we can reframe something potentially devastating even, but we can reframe it. And we're not talking about lying to ourselves to make ourselves feel better. We're talking about reframing with truth, okay, to end up in a better place. Chris also says, the gratitude list is where I look to help me reframe the current negative situation. It's so powerful. It's just so powerful. I cannot believe until I started writing out my gratitudes years ago, I used to think, what's the point? What's the point of a gratitude list? It's kind of silly. I would say this. When I was doing my personal work, you guys, when I was around in my mid-20s, I started going to therapy because I had some big issues that were screwing me up. And I remember telling my therapist, like, why write a gratitude list, man? I mean, I already know. And he would say, okay, so you already know. You're telling me you already know those things, those gratitudes. Yeah, I do. I already know. And so he would say, well, tell me some of those. I couldn't come up with one. I couldn't come up with one. Because that negativity bias and also connected to a lot of the other really dysfunctional thinking I had wasn't letting me. It was just making an excuse. I didn't know that list. I wasn't intimate with that list, that gratitude list. And together we can learn how to do that. Mark also says that I try to do gratitudes every day, and when I say something or think something negative and say or think a positive one. So, you guys, when you write out these lists, Mark, thanks for your comment. When you write out these lists, they need to be very, very methodical, right? I know that we're thankful for, that I have a meal, in front of me today, that I have a roof over my head. I mean, these are things that we should be grateful for. And also, there are tons of things. I'm grateful for how patient I was today with that person who annoyed me. Right? I'm grateful for, there are you can write such a huge list there if you sit and you actually contemplate those things that you're thankful for. And that's really a key to the gratitude list. We're actually digging deep. Okay? Is this helpful, you guys? I hope this is helpful today. Okay? There's so much here that we can use. Who thought that we could use negativity, and this negativity bias? Who thought that we could use this to actually increase our positivity, right? To motivate us more. And that's the reason I call this Motivated Minds, by the way. It's Motivated Minds because I've experienced devastation from these negative emotions, but by embracing them, I was able to move into a whole different sphere, of enlightenment, basically. Positive truths about myself that I wasn't aware of before, I started to become aware of. Okay? So my journey of change I shared with you. had to do with broken relationships. How did those bring me to a place of change? I felt rejected, again, hurt, abandoned, a lot of those things. And a lot of that stuff came from childhood, of course. But again, it was through those support people, those fact checkers. It came through my own personal work, being intentional about, I'm done with this. I remember one day getting up and just saying, I'm so done with doing this over again. I think I was like 31 years old, and I just said to myself, no, I don't want to do another day with this insanity. I'm so sick of being insecure and fearful and being hurt. What is it that I can do? There has to be something, because I can't go on for the rest of my life this way. I just can't. And that is when I began to, I remember the very first day that someone had, my therapist actually had said to me, write out that gratitude list, Carlos. I want you to think about gratitude. You've had so many years to think about your brokenness. You've had so many years to think about all of those negative thoughts and emotions. You've just fixated on them. I want you to start fixating on these gratitudes. And I'm going to leave you with this today. What I envisioned myself doing back then was driving a car. In my dysfunction, I'm driving a car, and my rearview mirror is massive in that car. It's huge. And that rearview mirror is not allowing me to see in front of me where I'm supposed to be driving. So what am I doing? I'm trying to look around this giant rearview mirror, and I'm crashing and burning. I'm crashing, burning into everything because I can't see where I'm driving. What's blocking me? The rearview mirror. What's in the rearview mirror? It's all my stuff. That's what I'm fixated on, right? I can't get out of the way of all those negative emotions and experiences and thoughts and all of that. That's all back there, but it's not in its right space. It's not in its right size. You see, if I take off that rearview mirror, which I tried to do, guess what I did? I still crashed and burned. Why? Because we need a rearview mirror to help us navigate. You ever drive without a rearview mirror? It's insane. It's only a matter of time before you crash. We need a healthy rearview mirror. And the rearview mirror began to come down to its healthy size when I began to accept failure instead of reject it. When I began to accept that I was hurt, that I was sad, that I felt alone, I began to accept those things so I can begin to work through them. Okay, that's what began to bring that mirror down to its right size. At some point, that mirror came down to a healthy size rearview mirror that was helpful for me. That rearview mirror serves a purpose. It is helpful. And I look at it all the time. When I'm driving, I look in my rearview mirror to make sure I see what's going on behind me, so I'm not caught by surprise. We don't have to be caught by surprise, people, right? By what's in the rearview mirror. But guess what I can focus on now? I can focus on my driving. Okay, I can be pretty present. I'm present now in my driving. And what am I focused on in front of me? I'm focused on where I'm going. Okay? So take that with you. Maybe you can use that a little bit even in your own life. This week, what does your rearview mirror look like? You know, how are you navigating? Is it too big? Do you need to bring it down to the right size? Is it a healthy rearview mirror, right, that's actually helping you navigate to where you're going? Or do we need to do some work? I want to go back to the last thing here. Just remember this. How to harness it. Best possible self. Okay. Gratitude journal. Write that gratitude journal. Start it right now, even after we're done. Start writing that. And savor those positive moments. Savor them. I'm not kidding you. Take your iPhone, take your phone, take your whatever it is that you take pictures with and videos, and capture those moments. Savor those positive moments. I'll tell you, when that couple comes back from that first vacation after their whole relationship blew up, when they come back after that and they share those positive moments with me, unreal. They just did they just did the 3-to-1. Okay, that's what they did. They took so many of those. They savored so many of those positive moments that they were able to come back, not thinking about the negative moments that happened. They were thinking about the positive moments. Why? Because they did the 3-to-1. So let's be intentional about that this week, okay, everybody? I know we can do this. I mean, I'm still in the process. There's been a lot of growth in my life in this area, and also I know that I'm still in the process. So the title I put on this is "And Also." That's a little bit of a hook, because next week when we get on here, I'm going to break down why that "and also" is so powerful. A colleague of mine once shared with me about how she works with her clients, and she uses this "and also" to bridge the negative and the positive. And we're going to bridge some negative and positive next week so that we can be better at what we do. If you're a content creator, this is going to help you be a more efficient, more inspired content creator. If you write, if you're an artist, or if you're whatever you do for a living, this is going to help you grow in that area. It's going to inspire you to be the best steward of that vocation that's been handed to you that you can be. Okay, we have to bridge the ideal with the real. Okay, so the ideal is I want to be this particular kind of person. Okay, I want to be super effective. I want to be this person that is super successful. And also, I'm going to fail sometimes. Do you get it? I want to be this person who encourages others and supports others, and inspires others. And also, there are times when I'm going to feel alone, or I'm going to feel hurt, or I'm going to feel like a failure. There might be those times. The "and also" is important. Otherwise, these unrealistic expectations we have of ourselves cause us a lot of pain. That's real suffering. Okay, when we set up these unrealistic expectations that we should always be on our A game. Stop shoulding on yourself. Right? We should on ourselves all the time. I should be this, I should be that. We do it all the time. What happens when you fail at that? How are you going to handle that? We need to set realistic expectations, and it has a lot to do with self-compassion. We're not very compassionate with ourselves, by the way. Some of you can probably relate out there, right? That we can beat ourselves up pretty good. So right before we finish up here, let me get in a few more comments that are here. Thank you, Mick. Awesome to see you. So that was Mick. Yes, the size of the review mirror, absolutely. It's so huge sometimes, right, Hobbs? It can be so massive that it's, again, I might be succeeding in this area, but I might be crashing and burning in this other area, that I'm not really talking about. But I'm just running into people, and I'm driving into trees, and I'm just crashing and burning because that rearview mirror is so big in that area of my life. I want wholeness. Again, I want wholeness. I don't want to just be successful in one area. I want to be whole, right? Peter Gregg pops his head up. Pictures. Someone say pictures. Oh, man. That guy, Peter, I know you are, such an optimist, and there's so much hope that you live in. I know so much of that comes through your faith that you've talked about before. And Peter's also explained to me, rejection. Yes, Peter, experiences some of this stuff, but I believe Peter is a more whole person today because he can admit that. Okay. So you guys, I hope you got something out of today. I hope that was helpful. I hope you were able to gain something from this. I do want to remind you to do this before you leave. If you could subscribe, like, comment, that would be helpful, because I don't know how long I can do this. I'm trying. I want to continue to make time to provide this for a lot of people that ask me to do this. It's going to depend on the support I think I'm from you guys. I want to know that this is something that you want. And so if it is something that everybody who is in this room still wants, let me know in the comments, because that's going to help. I got a lot on my plate with my clients, with my practice, and I want to do this if I know it's helping. So let me know in the comments if you could, everybody. So blessed to be with you guys tonight. Sunday night. The weekend is ending, and the beginning of the week is coming. Guess what? I don't feel that anxiety that I used to feel before. I'm feeling hopeful about the week. Why? Because I know I'm going to struggle some this week. I've already accepted that. I'm going to struggle a little bit this week with stuff. But I'm not going to crash and burn, because I've accepted that this is not going to be the ideal week where everything goes perfect. No, I'm accepting that there'll be some issues this week. And that's why I know I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be more than okay. I can't wait. All right, everybody, good to see everyone in the room. Thank you all for being here, for being a part of this. Thank you for chat. Any of you that were, commented in the chat section, that is so huge. This is intense for me, by the way. This brings up some stuff in me. And so I just want to thank you. Thank you guys for being a part of this, appreciate it so much, okay? We will see you guys next week. Psychoeducational Sundays will continue. See you then.